Usually a few overdue library books result in a fine, but one Northeast Wisconsin woman found herself in jail for failing to return items to a library. Why would police arrest someone over library books? Fox 11 investigates. Robert Hornacek has more on how a trip to the library eventually ended with a trip to jail.
30-year-old Tabitha Oost of Shawano won't soon forget her recent visit to Green Bay. Last month, the married mother of two crashed her car on Mason Street.
The airbags went off.
And was rushed to the hospital.
I ended up having damage to my scalp, my forehead, and my left eye.
While at the hospital,
I was still bleeding from my head.
she saw a doctor and a Green Bay police officer.
I was still on the stretcher when an officer came in to check out if I was okay, how I was doing.
The doctor had good news. She would be released. The officer had some bad news.
That's when he told me that I had a warrant for my arrest for Shawano County due to overdue library books.
Overdue library books.
You heard right, overdue library books. You see, back in 2011, Oost checked out a bunch of items from the Shawano Library, but she never returned them. She says she lost the items and simply forgot all about it. Officials in Shawano didn't.
We're not just talking about a couple dollars worth of unpaid fines. This was a lot of money.
Correct, Robert.
In fact, when Oost was picked up in Green Bay, there were 2 warrants for her arrest. As soon as Oost was released from the hospital, the officer took her to the Brown County Jail.
What was your first reaction?
I thought he was joking, honestly. I couldn't believe it. I ended up laughing, and the officer was laughing, and then told me he was actually serious.
Police in Shawano aren't laughing.
If you fail to return, you must be held accountable.
Captain Jeff Heffernan works for the Shawano Police Department. According to court records, in October of 2011, Oost and her daughter checked out several kids' books, including Giant Octopus to the Rescue and Freddie and Flossie. A few months later, Oost went back to the library and checked out more items, including some DVDs, such as Mary Poppins. Total value of the 21 items checked out, $499. The items were never returned.
You have no idea really
I
what
had
happened to
honestly
those
no
books.
idea.
Oost claims she never received anything from the library about the overdue materials, but the library director says that's not likely.
Is that possible, really?
I do hear that explanation at times. I think it's very minimal possibility.
Christy Hauer says the library always contacts people with overdue books multiple times. Court records show in Oost's case, the library sent her at least 2 emails and mailed her 3 separate letters before forwarding the case to Shawano Police.
We're trying to work with people, and it's kind of a last resort.
Hauer says if an item worth $25 or more is not returned to the library and the person doesn't respond to the library's repeated requests, the case gets forwarded to the Shawano Police Department. And that happens more than you might think. Here are some facts. Since 2011, the Shawano Library has forwarded 140 cases to the Shawano Police Department. And Hauer says some of those are worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars.
Why, in your opinion, is it a good idea for Shawano to be aggressive on this?
I think for us it's a way to be good holders of the taxpayer money that gets allocated to the library every year, and to try to keep our collections in a good condition and a good shape for everybody to use.
Do you think it can end up costing more resources, though, when you look at law enforcement time and things like that?
That is a good question. Most of the time, if we're not able to have much feedback from a patron, it takes one quick contact by the police department and a patron responds pretty quickly.
But that's not what happened in this case. Shawano Police say in April of last year, an officer met with Oost to tell her she had to return the items, pay for them, or she'd be cited. A week later, when the items weren't returned or paid for, police issued Oost 2 tickets for $177 each. Those tickets came with a mandatory appearance in municipal court.
Did you ever get
No.
anything in the mail saying you have a court date for this issue?
No.
But court records show several notices were mailed to Oost's apartment. She claims she never got them because she had moved. When Oost didn't show up for 2 court hearings, the judge issued a warrant for her arrest. And that's how she ended up in jail.
The fact that she ended up being arrested for this is really nobody's fault but her own.
In my opinion, absolutely.
Is this a good use of Shawano Police Department resources to try to track somebody down for library materials?
I think so, Robert. You know, many times people think of a children's book being, you know, failure to return, maybe at a loss of less than, you know, a few dollars. But in this particular case, it was well over $300. And in my book, that's a lot of money.
You admit that this was pretty much all your fault.
Yes, absolutely.
You're just saying you don't think you should have had to be taken to jail because of it.
Especially right after a car accident.
Oost only ended up spending a few minutes at the jail. It turns out her husband and her friend showed up right away and paid the $354 to bail her out. But she's not out of the woods just yet. You see, that money only paid for her 2 tickets. She still owes the library $499 in restitution. So after everything that's happened, the library still does not have its materials or the money to replace them. For Fox 11 Investigates, I'm Robert Hornacek.
How often are people arrested for overdue library books? Officials in Shawano say they don't know, but they do believe the vast majority don't get to that point.